There's a reason ancient rulers didn't treat cacao like a dessert. They treated it like power. According to historical accounts, the Aztec emperor Montezuma was said to consume cacao constantly, and not because it tasted good. He believed it supported stamina, energy, and male vitality. Now, was that exaggerated? Maybe. But here's the part that matters. Modern science has discovered that raw cacao contains compounds that may genuinely support one of the most important systems behind male performance after 40, after 50, and especially after 60, your blood vessels. And that changes everything. Because when most men notice lower energy, weaker stamina, and less reliable performance, they assume it's just age. But often, it's not just age. It's circulation. It's endothelial decline. It's blood vessels losing the flexibility they used to have. And if that's the real issue, then the question isn't, what miracle ingredient makes me feel 30 again? The better question is, what can support the biological systems that make vitality possible in the first place? That's what this video is about. Not hype, not fantasy, not fake overnight transformations, but a raw cacao formula that may support blood flow, energy, and male vitality in a far smarter way than most people realize. And the last ingredient is the one that makes this whole drink dramatically more interesting. Here's the mistake a lot of men make. They think vitality disappears in one dramatic moment. It doesn't. It fades gradually. And one of the biggest reasons is that your vascular system stops responding the way it used to. Think of your blood vessels like a highway. When you're younger, traffic moves smoothly. Signals work. The lanes stay open. Flow is efficient. But over time, that highway starts changing. The surface gets damaged. The lanes don't open as easily. Traffic slows down. And suddenly, the parts of your body that depend on strong circulation don't get what they need when they need it. That includes your muscles, your brain, your heart, and yes, male performance too. This is why blood flow matters so much more than people realize. Because vitality is not just about hormones. It's not just about testosterone. It's not just about mood. A huge part of it is whether your vascular system can still deliver efficiently. And one of the most important molecules involved in that process is nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is the signal that tells blood vessels to relax and widen. When nitric oxide production is strong, circulation improves. When it drops, blood flow becomes less responsive. That's one reason men often feel like their body isn't reacting the way it used to. Not because everything is broken, but because the system is less efficient. And this is exactly where raw cacao becomes interesting. Raw cacao is not just healthy chocolate. That's far too simplistic. Real raw cacao contains flavonols, especially compounds like epicatechin, that have been studied for their effects on endothelial function and circulation. In plain English, raw cacao may help your blood vessels work better. That alone makes it more than a comfort food, but it gets better, because cacao doesn't just work on one level. It may support vascular flexibility. It may support nitric oxide signaling. It may provide magnesium, which matters for relaxation, energy production, and vascular tone. And unlike the harsh spike and crash effect people get from sugary energy drinks or overloaded caffeine habits, cacao tends to feel smoother, warmer, more stable, less like a jolt, more like a lift. That matters. Because for a lot of men, the issue isn't that they need more stimulation, it's that they need a body that responds better. That is a completely different goal. And there's one more detail here that makes cacao especially fascinating. Some researchers have noted that compounds in cacao may influence pathways related to vascular relaxation in ways that overlap, at least conceptually, with mechanisms people often hear about in pharmaceutical support for male performance. Now let's be very clear. That does not mean cacao acts like a drug. It doesn't. The effect of food is gentler, slower, and far less dramatic. But it does mean cacao is not random. There is a real physiological reason it keeps showing up in conversations about circulation and vitality. So, cacao is the foundation, But by itself, it may not be the full story. Because one ingredient can help, the right combination can help more. If cacao is the foundation, beetroot is the most important partner. And honestly, this is where the formula becomes much stronger. Why? Because beetroot works through a different nitric oxide pathway. Cacao primarily gets attention for supporting endothelial function. Beetroot is rich in dietary nitrates. Those nitrates can be converted in the body into nitric oxide through another route entirely. That means you're not just pushing one button, you're supporting blood flow from two directions. And that matters even more for older men. Because as men age, endothelial function often declines. In simple terms, the body gets worse at producing the signals that keep blood vessels flexible and responsive. So if one pathway weakens over time, supporting another pathway becomes incredibly valuable. That's what makes beetroot such a smart addition. Not because it's trendy, but because the logic is strong. Cacao helps support the blood vessel lining. Beetroot helps provide raw material for nitric oxide through a separate pathway. That is what I would call a dual mechanism strategy. And when it comes to circulation, dual mechanism support is always more interesting than putting all your hope into one ingredient. This is also where many people start noticing the difference between internet hype and actual physiological thinking. Internet hype says, "Here's the one secret." Real physiology says, "Systems respond better when you support them from multiple angles." That is exactly what this cacao plus beetroot combination does. Now let's talk about the ingredient that doesn't sound exciting, but may be one of the smartest additions in the entire drink. Ceylon cinnamon. Most people hear cinnamon and think flavor, warmth, sweetness, something seasonal. But the real reason cinnamon belongs in a formula like this has almost nothing to do with taste. It has to do with protection. Because one of the biggest enemies of healthy blood vessels is poor blood sugar control. When blood sugar remains too high too often, it damages the vascular system gradually, quietly, year after year. So even if you're adding ingredients that support circulation, you are still fighting an uphill battle if your metabolic health is undermining your blood vessels in the background. This is why cinnamon is useful, not because it turns the drink into medicine, but because it supports the bigger picture. It may help support insulin sensitivity. It may help smooth out part of the metabolic chaos that damages vascular health over time. So think of the formula like this. Cacao helps support the road, beetroot helps open more lanes, and cinnamon helps protect the road from wearing down too quickly. That's a very different way of thinking about vitality, not as one dramatic boost, but as a system that has to be supported, protected, and maintained. And honestly, that's far more realistic, because the men who age best usually don't win through extremes. They win through consistency. Now we get to maca. This is one of those ingredients that gets a lot of emotional marketing around it. Traditional use, mountain-grown superfood, ancient vitality root. And to be fair, that history is part of what makes maca interesting. Many men report that maca helps them feel more steady, more energized, and more resilient. Some say it supports stamina. Some say it improves subjective vitality. And that may be true for certain people. But here's where I want to be more honest than most videos are. Maca is not the strongest scientific pillar in this formula. It is better described as a supportive option than a proven centerpiece. That doesn't make it bad. It just means it should be put in the right category. For some men, maca may be useful because it supports how they feel, their energy, their stress resilience, their sense of drive. And sometimes that matters a lot because vitality is not purely mechanical. It is not just blood vessels and chemistry. It's also whether you feel engaged, motivated, switched on. So I do see value in maca. I just don't like pretending it's doing far more than the evidence really shows. And that is exactly why it can still fit in this drink. Not as the hero, but as a secondary layer, a useful optional upgrade, especially for men who respond well to it. The fourth add-in is cayenne pepper. And this one is less about being the star of the formula and more about adding intensity. Cayenne does something interesting. It creates heat. That heat changes the sensory experience of the drink immediately. You feel it in the mouth, in the throat, in the chest. It creates a warming response that many people associate with stimulation and circulation. Now, physiologically, capsaicin is genuinely interesting. But from a practical point of view, I think cayenne works best as a small enhancer, a pinch, not a full statement. Too much and the drink becomes unpleasant. Too much and some people's stomach won't love it. But the right amount, it can make the drink feel alive. And that matters more than people think. Because health routines that feel flat often don't last. But a ritual that feels rich, warm, slightly intense and satisfying, that's something people actually come back to. And that may be one of the hidden strengths of this whole formula. It doesn't feel like punishment. It feels like a ritual, a deliberate one. Now here's the part that makes this video different from most male vitality content online. This drink is not a miracle. It is not a shortcut around biology. And it is definitely not powerful enough to override a broken lifestyle. If you're sleeping 5 hours a night, if you're constantly stressed, if you barely move all day, if your waistline is climbing, if your blood pressure is ignored, no cacao drink is going to rescue that situation by itself. And that's not me being negative, that's me respecting reality. Because real male vitality is never built on one trick. It's built on a foundation. This drink can be part of that foundation. It can be an amplifier, a support system, a smart daily ritual that helps circulation, energy, and metabolic resilience. But it works best when it sits on top of the real basics: better sleep, more walking, strength training, blood sugar control, less abdominal fat, less chronic stress. That is the difference between a health strategy and a health fantasy. And if you understand that, you immediately become much harder to fool. Because you stop asking, what's the one ingredient that changes my life? And you start asking, what routine helps my body respond better over time? That is a far more powerful question. So if you want to try this in a practical way, here's the version I think makes the most sense. Start with 2 tablespoons raw cacao powder, 1 to 2 teaspoons beetroot powder, half a teaspoon Ceylon cinnamon, optional, 1 teaspoon maca powder, optional, a small pinch of cayenne pepper. Mix that into 1 cup warm water or 1 cup unsweetened milk of choice. If needed, add just a little raw honey or no-calorie sweetener. But keep it light. The point is not to turn this into dessert. The point is to create a daily vascular support ritual. Drink it in the morning or early afternoon. That timing makes more sense for most people because cacao feels gently energizing, not harsh, not jittery, but still stimulating enough that late-night use may not be ideal for everyone. And when you drink it, don't just rush through it. Actually treat it like a ritual. The dark bitterness of cacao, the earthy depth of beetroot, the warmth of cinnamon, the slight edge of cayenne. This is not just about ingredients. It's about creating a repeatable habit your body begins to associate with energy, intention, and consistency. And consistency is where the real value begins. Now, if you try this, evaluate it the right way. Don't ask, did I become 30 again in 3 days? That's nonsense. Ask better questions. Do I feel steadier energy? Do I feel less of that dead zone in the afternoon? Do workouts feel more supported? Do I feel more physically responsive overall? Does this help me stay consistent with a healthier routine? That is how adults measure whether something is working. Because the best effects of a drink like this, if they happen, are usually subtle at first. More stable energy, a better sense of circulation, a stronger daily rhythm. Those changes may not look dramatic in one day, but over time, subtle improvements often matter more than flashy promises. And that's another lesson worth remembering. The internet loves dramatic claims. The body often responds to steady inputs. That is why simple rituals, repeated consistently, can become surprisingly powerful. So no, raw cacao is not magic, and no drink on earth can erase the effects of poor sleep, high stress, bad food, and years of neglect. But that doesn't mean this idea is empty. It means the idea has to be understood correctly. Raw cacao is interesting because it may support the vascular system. Beetroot makes it stronger by supporting nitric oxide through another pathway. Ceylon cinnamon helps protect the bigger metabolic picture. Maca may help some men feel more resilient. Cayenne can bring warmth, intensity, and a sense of activation. Taken together, this is not a miracle cure. It is something better, a smart, grounded, repeatable ritual. And maybe that's what real vitality has always looked like. Not one dramatic rescue, not one secret ingredient, but a series of intelligent choices that help the body do what it was designed to do, more efficiently, more consistently, and with less resistance. So if you've been looking for one flashy trick to feel young again, this probably isn't the answer you expected. But if you've been looking for a smarter place to begin, this might be one worth remembering. And sometimes, the habits that change how you feel don't start with something loud. They start with something warm, simple, and repeated often enough to matter.